My name is Tamara Sorensen Duncan, and I'm an assistant prof at Carleton University. I work in the School of Linguistics and Language Studies, and I teach the linguistics courses about communication disorders. My research program investigates language and literacy development in children from diverse populations, including children who have exceptional needs. So students with exceptionalities is a term that we often use as an umbrella term. So that encompasses a wide range of disabilities and differences. So you can think about children with autism, you can think about children who maybe have dyslexia, which is now called a specialized learning disability in reading and writing. You can think about children who have developmental language disorder, which is a specific disorder that impacts language learning. We can think about children who have intellectual disabilities. And these children are children who need additional supports. They need adaptations in the classroom. So we often think about these students with exceptionalities as being rare or something that we're not likely to see in schools. But as we start to think about it and look more deeply at it, we realize that they're quite common. So something like autism is estimated to occur in about 1.5% of the population. If we think about something like developmental language disorder, which estimates put it at there'll be roughly 2 children in every classroom that have developmental language disorder that's severe enough to impact their academic progress. And dyslexia estimates are very similar to those of developmental language disorders. So when we take this all together, this is actually something really common in our schools that teachers are dealing with on a daily basis. But when it comes to second language learning classrooms, it might not actually be quite as common as what we're seeing in the general school system, because these children have often faced barriers to accessing second language learning classes. But when we actually look at their abilities to do so, we see that they're quite capable of learning a second language. And so generally what the research shows is that students who are learning a second language who have exceptionalities are doing just as well as children with exceptionalities who are monolingual. There's no evidence that it's causing extra challenge for these children. Learning a second language isn't going to take away the exceptionality, but it's not going to make it any worse, is largely what the research shows. So the most common misconception that I hear when I talk with teachers, when I talk with community members, when I talk with policymakers, is that, well, if learning one language is hard for students with exceptionalities, surely learning 2 languages is even harder. Surely learning 2 languages might just be too much of a burden for these children. And our research doesn't support that. It logically makes sense that we would want to not add burden. But research shows that learning 1 language is hard and learning 2 languages is hard, but it's not harder. The children are doing just as well when they're learning a second language as if they were not learning it. There's so many countries around the world, we can draw on evidence from Australia, from the United States, from England, that all reinforces and converges on this idea that supporting bilingualism is beneficial for these children. So we're having this consistency in the findings that children with exceptionalities do just as well in second language learning programs, in bilingual programs, in immersion programs. So we have this converging evidence that really challenges this idea that learning 2 languages is too hard for these kids. So one thing when we're thinking about bilingualism and second language learning in children that have exceptionalities is to make sure we're setting our expectations correctly. And so it's something to keep in mind that we learn about what it looks like to learn a second language with an exceptionality and normalize that. And so trying to take a step back from what's happening in the classroom and think about that student with exceptionalities and think, are they performing as well as they can for their strengths and their weaknesses? Are we offering the right support that this child needs? And how do we do that to make sure they can stay in the second language classroom? So when I think about children with exceptionalities, the metaphor that comes to mind for me comes from this lovely children's book. It's called The Fish in the Tree, and it's a novel about a girl who goes through school feeling misunderstood. She thinks her teachers think she's lazy, that she's a bad student, but she just really can't figure it out. Then in grade 6, she meets this marvelous teacher who understands. He sees how brilliant she is and that reading is a struggle. It turns out the child has dyslexia. And he asks her, what happens if you judge a fish by how well it can climb a tree? And I think that fish in a tree metaphor, or a fish out of water, is a great analogy for thinking about students with exceptionalities, thinking about all of the other strengths they have and making sure we remember how much they are capable of as well. We need to work together to be making sure that all children are having these opportunities. And the research is really at a point where we have a lot of convincing evidence that children can and do learn a second language, even when they have an exceptionality. And now we're at this optimal point to start asking, how do we best support them? What services do we need in place to make sure that all children have access to the wonderful opportunities of second language learning, to make sure that our second language classrooms are as inclusive as possible?